Hello guys and welcome back. In the previous parts we have successfully designed our sign in and sign up pages, and also we did the validation, and so right now our forms are validated. And also I have just added these two fields in the UI, which is the last name and also the password confirmation to the UI, and I have just uploaded this code on GitHub so you can get it from there. But besides that, when submitting these forms, and if suppose all these fields are validated and entered with some data, and we press on this button, unfortunately we do nothing because we haven't completed our actual sign in and also the sign up to the server. So in this part, our main goal is to just complete the authentication, even though not completing, at least connect to the server and get some response. So what we can do inside the here inside our models, in the application layer inside the models, and I notice we have this sign in and also sign up form, but it is really a good practice to put this through inside another directory. Let me call it as Auth, and I am just going to put or going to move these files inside this Auth directory. So we have models Auth, and right now you can see we get these errors, and the errors are because we have just moved these files and they are not existed anymore in that path. So we need to just change the path. So let me delete this one, and let me just click on this, and by pressing command dot we can bring these models into our UI. So we have this, so let me refresh the app and we are good to go. And the same thing I am going to do with these classes, because it is really good to separate them. So I am going to create another directory. I'll call it as errors, so we might have more than one error, and for now we have only one, which is the common error. So the same thing, let me delete this one, and also let me bring the common error, and also the same procedure with the sign up model. So we are good to go. And right now we have these classes, and inside that we have errors, and for that we have only one error, and that is our common error. So inside the models and Auth we have this sign in form that we completed last part, and here we have this submit sign in, and submit sign in, which is a function. So basically what we are going to do is, when we just press on this sign in and the user is entered the email and also the password, so we want to just send a request to the server and also try to authenticate this user. So what we can do here is just directly put the DAU package that I have told you before. This DAU or DAU package is an HTTP client, so we can use it. It is really easy to use it, so we can put directly DAU equal to new DAU, and also we can just call like the DAU.post, DAU.get. so these are the methods that we can use it. So if suppose I put the post here, first of all we need to provide the path, and also we have something called the data, and we need to provide the data, and after we call this one, so this is a future which returns a response here, and if we call that we'll get a response, so we can try to authenticate the user. And let me do this way first of all because it makes sense. And before that, what I'm going to do is I am going to open the Postman. So if you remember, as we did, or we completed the back-end part, and there I mentioned for the API testing we'll use the Postman, and for that let me call the login route that we completed here. So we have this path which is to the login. So let me put this path here. So this is our path, and for the data, first of all, what we have is the email. So let me put some email here, and also we have the password. So these are two things which is required by the login route. So let me open the database, and from the database let me select from the users, and from the users I am going to copy this first user email, and the email I'm going to put it here. And for the password, if you remember, all of the passwords are just password, and this is our request. So let me just close this navigation bar. Here we have this one, and this is how we can send a request. And if you see here, this is a future, so we need to await for that, and for that we need to first of all make this method as async, and also we need to await for the post method or for the response. And after awaiting, so this will gives us the response, and this response is basically the response that we are getting from the server. So let me first of all just print this response. So print response, and we are good to go right now. And if I suppose put an email which is not an email, so let me put it because we are validating here. So let me copy that email and just paste it here, and for the password it is password. So, and if I click, so before clicking let me put a breaking point here. So for the testing part we are just creating a debugging or a breakpoint here. So if I click on this sign in right now, so nothing is happening. Let me open the terminal. Why nothing is happening? And here we have this one. So let me refresh. Sometimes we need to refresh the app, and again I am going to paste the email here and also type the password here. And if I click, still we are not getting anything. And for that I'm going to the sign in page, and inside the sign in what we have is here we have this one. If this part, if the singleton is not validating, we are showing an error. But else, if suppose that is not true, if it's validated, in the else part what we want is we want to just use this singleton form, and on that we can just call set state, and this, if you remember, will give the the sign in form state. And on that what we can do is we can just call the dot submit sign in, and if we do that means we are good to go. And right now if I press this one, you can see we are here in this sign in or submit sign in. And if I just click on this one, which is the next step or a step into in the debugging, I hope you know the basics of debugging in VS Code or debugging the Flutter application. So this is a great way to know the flow of your application. So right now if I just step into here, we initialize the DO and we are sending this response to the server. If I do so, right now we'll get an error. So why that is there? Because our server is not running. So let me first of all open the back end here, and let me write PHP artisan serve to just start our server. And right now our server is running at port 8000. So we got an error here. So let me submit it. You can see we got this error. So we need to handle this error. So we'll do that. And for the testing part, I have just added this thing. And as you know, these are not a really good way to do. We'll just change the way or the implementation way. So let me close this one. And here we have this one. Let me submit it again, and let me just go. And if I do so, right now we got something, we got a response. So we have this response, and if I print that response here, let me just open here. So if you see here, we have the token. So means that we successfully connected to the server, and right now we have a response. But even though we have completed or we have accomplished this task, this is not the way that we are going to do with this application. This is not the way that you will do in your application or Flutter application, because as I mentioned earlier, with the small applications you can do this one, but for larger applications what you need to do is you need to separate, or you need to just make layers into your application to test it, to test it very easily, and also to have a fine-tuned application. And to do that, I have created a simple diagram here to just simply understand the way we are doing it. So here we have the widgets or our UI, and related to that we have the models or view models that we created. So what we need is, right now we need a state or states, because we have opportunities, we have sign in, we have many things. So we need states, and each and every one of those part will have a unique state related to that part. And these states will be connected to the repositories, because these states are just a source of truth that this view model will provide to the widgets or to the UI. And also these widgets can directly access to the states. So these states acts as a source of truth for your UI. And these states will get the data from the repositories. So these repositories will be dependent on the network data source whenever we are connecting to the server or remote server, or we are having some local caching mechanism in our application. So if suppose the network is not connected, we are just loading the local cached data. So these repositories will do that. I mean, these repositories will provide the data either from a network data source or a local data source. So we are not going to do this local data source, and it is really easy. So you can just cache the data and check if there is a network connectivity. You can just load it from there. Otherwise, you can just connect to the network and get the data. And so in the later applications, I will try to have or try to accomplish this local data source, or a way to cache the data and read it again. So right now what we need is here. So let me delete all these things, or let me first of all comment it out here, and let me just delete this and use .yu package. What we need is we need a data source, or we need a state here. And for that, we need to create a state. So if you remember from the beginning, we have this state, and also we have these repositories. So for the state, the first state that I am going to create, I am going to call it as auth_state.dart. And this auth state is basically a class, a simple plain Dart class, and I am going to call it as auth state. And this auth state will have a function which is a sign in function. So we are going to do that. So we have this auth state, and right now we can just use it. But as I mentioned here, these states, or the auth states, are connected to the repositories, and these repositories are responsible for providing the data either from the network data source or a local data source. So what we need is, right now we need to have a repository equivalent to that. So I'm going to call it as auth repository.dart. So this is our Dart, the auth repository. So we have this auth repository, and equivalent to that we have this auth states. So somehow these are connected, and all of these will be connected to the sign in for model. So why we are doing all this complicated stuffs as we completed this task inside this submit sign in, and it was really easy and we accomplished that. But you can see here we are just every time initializing this DAU, and also we are just repeating ourselves the same way, and also we are not having some kind of error handling mechanism and also some kind of caching mechanism, or whenever we want to separate the layers of our application. So we need to just do a little bit more work. I mean, even though this easy works, this easy codes right now makes sense, but if you just move on with your application, this will be a real headache. So we are doing all this stuff to just structure our code very truly and also maintain our code in future very easily. So right now we have these two things, the auth state, and also we have this auth repository. So auth repository, also the first thing that I am going to do is I'm going to create an abstract class, and I am going to call it as auth repository. So you might be wondering, repository, you might be wondering why I have created this abstract class. I mean, why I didn't create a concrete class, and just why I'm doing this abstraction layer. Because this abstraction layer in your application, first of all, it is really easy to test your application, and if you do the testing and whenever you're working on with the the abstractions, and also whenever you are creating some repository class or any class and you have multiple methods, suppose you have sign in, you have the sign up, or sign out, sign in, and all this, and you want to implement or do not miss the implementation of these methods, first of all what you need to do is you need to create an abstract class, and then from that you need to just what you can do is you need to create an implementation class for this abstract class, and then you just need to implement those methods. What I do mean by that, let me create first of all this future. Right now it is just a future, later on we'll change it, and I'll call it as sign in. So this is our sign in method, which is a future. So this sign in method will need a string email and also a string password. So we need this one, and let me do one thing else, and we need to require this email and password. So let me do it like this. So first of all, these are named parameter, and also I am going to call at required, and I am going to bring the import foundation.dart. So we have this required, and also we have this password also as required. So we have this method, and this is our sign in method, and we have this abstract class. And right now this method doesn't have an implementation, as you know about the abstract class and also the methods inside that. What we want is right now we want another class, and I am just going to call it as this one, auth repository, and I am going to add impl or implementation, which implements the auth repository. And you can see right now, as I implement, I use these implements, and from this abstract class, you can see this red is quickly line. And why this is happening? Because we have missing concrete implementation of this sign in method. So this is one of the benefits of abstracting that I mentioned earlier, and we need to right now, let me just press the command dot to override this method, and right now we need to just provide this implementation for this class. And suppose we have another method. Let me copy and paste it here, and I am going to call it as sign app. So right now we consider that we need this two, or I mean the email and password. Later on we'll change it. So again, you can see that we have this red squiggly line, and still this is saying that right now we need to just missing the concrete implementation of auth repository dot sign app method. So this is one of the benefits of the abstracting, and we'll use that to implement our application, and we'll use it a lot in this application. So we have this auth repository, and the same way what we need is for this auth state. This auth state will have this final auth repository. So right now you can see I am just calling this auth repository, which is an abstract class, and I am not using the concrete implementation, because this will help, or this will be really beneficial when testing the application, and if you are using some way of testing for your application. So I am just going to call it as auth repository, and this, let me just, as it is a final, so I need to add it in the constructor. And first of all, what I'm going to do is I'm going to call the assert, because what I want is this auth repository should not be null. So we want this one. So right now what we have is, first of all, we have a repository, and we just connected this repository to our state, but unfortunately this state is not connected to the view model or the models. So how we can connect this auth state to our model, the sign in model and also the sign app model? That is really easy. The same way that we can do is we can create a final. Let me create a final this auth state right now. So this auth state is let me call it as auth state is equal to that injector that I told you before. So we have this injector. So the injector dot get, and not get reactive, so just get. And this get, let me just put the type here, and this get is the type of auth state. So right now we have this auth state, and from this auth state we can have access to all the methods and all the values, as we know about the injector, which is coming from the states rebuilder, and we use it, if you remember, inside our sign in page and also the sign app page. So right now we are connected these view models to the state, and also state has a repository. So this is all the things that we need, and let me just move forward with creating the the method. So inside the auth, inside the states auth state, what we need is we need to have this future. So I am just going to call it as a sign in, and this sign in still will require the email. So string email, and also we have the string so password. So that's it. And inside this one, what we need to do is, let me again, even though this some few parts these are really boring, I believe, so let me put at required, because these are required. So let me, not material, so foundation, yeah, and also I am going to add required here also. So we have the required. So this is our sign in method, and this sign in method right now so has a return type of future dynamic. So right now it does nothing. And first of all, what we need is from this sign in, which is inside our auth.state right now, we want to call the auth repository, and from that we are going to call the sign in method, and we are going to pass the email and also the password that we got from this sign in, which is inside our auth state. So we have the password. So that's it. And right now, this sign in right now has the type of future dynamic, but later on we will change it to have the return type of a user, and we are going to put that user inside our state, which is our source of truth. So as if I hover on this sign in, you can see it is a future. So what we need is we need to await for that, but before that we need to create this method as async. So then right now here we are able to await for this one. So we have this sign in method inside our auth state, and right now if I go to my sign in for model, and from this auth state I have access to this auth state dot sign in. So the sign in still needs the email and also the password. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the this dot email and also this dot password. So right now we have it, but still the sign in inside the auth state is a future. We need to await for that. So await, and we are good to go. And right now if I just do like this one, we are going to get an error. And why that is happening? So let me first of all refresh this application, and still you can see here the model, the auth state is not registered yet. So here inside our sign in model, inside our sign in for model, first of all we are trying to get the auth state from the injector. But unfortunately, we are not registered our auth state yet. If you remember from our previous sessions inside the sign-in page, what we need to have is, first of all, inside this injector, we need to inject something that we want to use in our application. So if you remember from this part, first of all, we have injected this sign-in for model, and again after calling the builder we were able to get it. So here, so before injecting we are not able to get it. So how or where we can inject this sign in state? And the best part for that is inside the main part. Here inside the main we have this material app, but before that, so let me first of all just cat it, and I am going to return an injector here. So you remember from the injector, this injector, first of all, the first thing that needs is the inject part. So we have this inject, which is an array, so we can have multiple models or multiple states, multiple anything, or multiple models related to the state tree builder. And we have this builder, and this builder, if you remember, will have the context, but right now we are even not interested in that, but I'm going to put it. So we're going to return this material app. So if I do so, and if I just refresh the app, so let me do it, and let me open the terminal, still we are getting this part. And that is because we are not still injected. You can see that is injected is still empty. So how we can inject it? That is really easy. So we can call the inject, if you remember. So this inject, and for that we need to have this if you see from the sign in, first of all we need to call the inject, and this inject will have the type and also will have this method will return that part. So I am going to the main part. So this inject, inside the inject, let me put the first of all the type, so that is auth state, and inside this auth state we are going to return this function, and we are going to call the auth state. But right now you can see we are getting this error, and this error because one positional argument is expected but 0 found, and that is, if you remember, inside our auth state. So let me open it. We need to have this auth repository. So this auth repository is asserted here, and it needs to be not null. So what I am going to do is I am going to put the auth repository impl or implementation. Just make sure about this one, and if I do so, and if I just save it right now, and if I refresh the app, you can see we are good to go. Why? It's happening because right now we have access to this auth state, and also it's injected here before our main, and it is right now accessible throughout the application. So this is somehow we can call it as dependency injection, and this is provided by the states rebuilder, and this is really a nice and really a good way to do, and I highly recommend just go through the states rebuilder package and read the documentation, so it will help you out. So we have these parts done, and right now in our sign in page here, if we have the email, so let me do that, and let me first of all close all these parts. So I'm going to close it, and I am going to open the sign in for model, and here inside the sign in, hopefully we have this part, and that is this breaking point. So we have this one. I mean, the email is entered by the user and also the password. And what we are doing is calling this auth state the sign in. So this is from our state here inside the auth state, and again this sign in will call another sign in inside the repository, and this repository is responsible to have a connection to the server. So we are basically doing the actual, the actual connection to the server, or even to the local storage, if you remember from this chart. So inside the repositories, and right now we want to connect to the either to the network or to the local caching. So here is our actual implementation that we need to do is. So what we need to do is the same way that we did inside our this part, inside this submit sign in, if you remember. So if I just put it here right now, and let me do one thing. So let me first of all do it like this one. Later I'm going to change it, and I need to create this sign in as async. And if I do it like this right now, we are good to go, and we are getting the response. So first let me do one thing. This part is okay, but for this part, let me just copy this part, and I am going to put as email, which we are getting inside, from this function. So let me just put a comma here to refactor it. Here we have the sign in, we get this email and also the password. So the same thing I am going to do with the password, and I am going to just paste that email here. And for the password, I am going to type the password. So if I right now just press this sign in, you can see this submit sign in is called, and if I just debug it, you can see we are calling the the sign in inside the auth state, and right now we are inside this repository here, and here, so first of all, sorry, inside the auth state, and here we are calling again the sign in inside the repository. So if I press in, if I just press this step into, you can see right now we are just, so let me do it like this one, and like this. Let me go again. We got this problem, and the problem is unimplemented handle target, something like that. So we have this problem here, and the problem is that we are missing something, and that part, let me just go through it. Here inside the repository we have this response, and first of all we have all these things, and unfortunately we are getting this error. So the problem was that I need to restart the app, because sometimes whenever we are getting an error, so this I found it really strange that this Flutter will just hang, and later on if we just use this debugging will not move, so or go to the next step. So just repeating that step, I found it strange really. So I just refreshed the app, or hot reload, not hot reload, just restarted the app, and right now we are getting this response. So let me do it again. So here, first of all, if I click, you can see we are just inside the, this sign in for model, and we are right now on this submit sign in. And if I just go to the next step, so here, first of all, we have this dot email, and here we have this dot password. So this is the email and this is the password. And if I click again, you can see right now we are inside the auth state, and we are calling this sign in method. So let me click it again. Here we are still in this sign the auth state, but right now we are navigated to the auth repository implementation. And here, first of all, we are initializing this value, and after that we are just calling this endpoint to this endpoint. And what we are doing is, let me just click it again. So we sent a request to the server, and after that, so again we are getting the response, and we printed the response. You can see we got another response. So this is right now the way that we are going to do, but still there is a problem. And the problem is, if you see right now here inside the repository, we are instantiating this DAU every time, and for the next for the next method, if suppose it is sign up or sign out, we need to again initialize this DAU. And suppose this DAU needs some way of authentication. If you remember from our back end, and inside the routes, here we have some routes which are prefixed with auth. These are okay, but some of our routes needs some way of authentication. So this auth.api middleware needs the authorization key to be, or the token key to be added to the request. So how we can do that? So we need to create something that we, to do not repeat ourselves, and also to handle all the API endpoints from that place. And to do that, first of all, what I'm going to do is I am just going to copy this part, and the way I am doing is all the time in equivalent to this, or the same level as this main, I am creating something called the base URL. So this is our base URL.dart, and every time if we just change the URL of the application, or suppose we are hosting this backend on a cloud or somewhere on the cloud or a shared hosting, so we'll have a different base URL. So the way I am going to do is I am just going to put it here. So we have a constant string, and that this is our base URL, and just I am going to paste that base URL. So this is our the exact location to change the base URL, and we'll use this base URL in the entire application. And suppose if you change your base URL, the only place that you need to change this URL is here. So if you change it, if you put something else, you can just come here and change it. So this is a good practice in my opinion, to put the base URL in one place, and every time if you want to use it, you can have it, and if you want to change it, you can have it here in one place, and it will affect in the entire application. So we have this base URL, and also what I'm going to do is inside this application layer, so make sure that we are in the same layer. Inside this application layer, I am going to create a file, and I am going to call it as forset_api.dart. So basically, this is the name of our application, and I have just added or extended this API. So as I mentioned earlier, we'll have all our API settings we'll have here. For now we don't have that much, and we'll have the only the DU configuration here. So let me create this class. So we'll have the a class forset API. So this is a class, and here we'll have first of all a static, not this one, static base options. So this is coming from the Dart, and sorry, it's from the DU package. So I'm going to call it base options is equal to new base options. If you see right now, it's coming from the DU, and inside this base options we can put something, and the only property that I'm going to use is the the base URL, and this base URL is equal to that base URL. So this right now you can see how easy it is to use our base URL. So we have this option, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to create another static file, and is that, sorry, not file, a static property, and that is our DU. So I'll call it as DU, which is equal to new DU, and we need to just paste or just pass that base options here. So we have this DU package, and right now the good thing is that we have access to this base URL. So we don't need to put this base URL every time. So we have that. So let me do one thing. First of all, I'm going to delete this DU from here, and also this DU from here too. And the same thing, what I'm going to do is just I am going to await and also call that forset API dot DU. You can see how easy it is, and just call the post method on that. And for the path right now, we have this base options, so we don't have that, or we didn't need that. So the only part that we need is this part. So we have this API auth login, and for data we can put this data here. So we have this data, and let me put a semicolon here and also a comma here, and let me delete this response from here. So right now we have that, but this will return a response. If you see, it's again, it's a post. So I am going to put the response, let me call it war response, so it's okay. So we don't need to put that. So we have this response, and right now we can print it, and it will work well. And let me first of all copy this, or we have copied, or we can copy it from the database. So we have this one. So let me go to the database, and let me copy that email from here, and I'm going to the Flutter application, I'm going to paste it, and I'm going to put the password as the password. And if I click on the sign in, still we will have the same result. And right now you can see we have this access token. So this is a good way to do, and right now we have this DU. So let me put a comment here. So this DU will use it for unauthenticated routes and authenticated routes or APIs. And later on, suppose we have something, so this is also a static, will return DU. So we'll call it as DU auth. So this will need some way of authentication. For now, I am just going to return the DU. So this is for our authenticated APIs. So we need to again customize it, authenticated routes. And for this, first of all, we need to have some interceptors, and inside that interceptors also will check for the refresh token, and also if the token is expired, we need to refresh it. And this is all the things that we need to do. So we have these two things. So we have basically this forset API. So this is a class that we can configure all the API settings, or the routes that we are going to call it. So we are going to put it here from the interceptors and everything that we need to put. So this is also a good practice that you can do. So hopefully we have accomplished the right now we are able to sign in to the application, and we are getting this access token with all the information. But what we need is we need to store this token in the somehow in the local storage or in shared preferences to use it later on. Also we need to get the the user, and if you remember, we got some some errors, and we need to have some kind of error handling, and for that we are going to do it in the next tutorial. So if this tutorial was helpful, kindly subscribe and hit the bell button so you don't miss the next part, which we are going to implement the actual error handling, and also a way or a mechanism to store this token and how to use it. And also we are going to fetch the user, and also we are going to complete the sign up part. So this was all about the sign in part. Hopefully we created this the auth repository and also the estate, and we connected these two together, and all we connected to the sign in form model. So right now we are able to do it. And I know if I continue with the sign up part, so this video will get lengthy. It's better to put it in the next tutorial in the sign up part. So thank you for watching and have a great time.